Hello everyone, and welcome to Biopedia. Today we're going to be discussing sibling species, which refers to species which have a very recent common ancestor but cannot be distinguished in many ways. Now, sibling species are one stage within the larger process of speciation. In the first instance, subspecies arise. The next phase is then semispecies. This refers to two populations which do not often breed. When and if they do, their male offspring will not be able to reproduce. It is through the action of natural selection on semispecies that you end up with sibling species. Sibling species are two species which will generally appear similar, but there will be subtle or small differences that mark the individual species out. Such species may seem indistinguishable, but are reproductively isolated. Differences in habitat range, habitat type, or morphology can usually be found if the species are studied a bit more closely. A useful example concerns two North American bird species, the Alder flycatcher and the willow flycatcher. The alder and willow flycatchers were, in fact, historically considered to be one species, under the taxonomic designation of Empidonax trailii. In 1973, the 32nd supplement to the American Ornithologists Union checklist of North American birds was published. It specifically acted to highlight changes taken on board by the Committee on Classification and Nomenclature since the 5th edition had been released in 1957. Regarding E. trailii, the authors noted that the species had originally been identified on the basis of a breeding pair in the Arkansas River Prairie, which is where a population lives which sings a distinctive song. However, there is also a second population which has a different song. Attempts at splitting the species have been made before. In 1895, Brewster had created the subspecies E. trailii alnorum out of populations living in the boreal forests of Maine. Historically, then, the viewpoint was that there were two subspecies rather than distinct species. The 1973 supplement formally split flycatchers into two species, E. trailii and E. alnorum, or the willow flycatcher and the alder flycatcher respectively. The new species of E. alnorum included populations from the boreal forests of Alaska, Canada, and the eastern United States, which had in the previous checklist been part of the subspecies E. trailii, while E. trailii populations were now those populations from E. trailii which lived in the Great Plains, open habitats, and prairies, as well as populations of a previous subspecies called E. trailii brewsteri, which lived in the western USA and the southern part of British Columbia in Canada. I realise that this sounds confusing, so to summarise. Flycatchers had historically been considered one species with several subspecies. However, as of 1973, flycatchers were formally split into two distinct species, with different populations being assigned to them. This means that, today, the willow and alder flycatchers are recognised as sibling species to one another. Note that the habitats of these two species seem to obey the idea that sibling species may differ in their habitat type or range, as outlined above. As mentioned at the beginning of today's episode, sibling species are part of the route towards speciation. However, they are not the final step. In the last phase of the process, then, sibling species will diverge further into distinct species which do not look alike, in contrast to sibling species in the previous stage. That's it from me today. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes, feel free to get in touch at the show's email address. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.